The kitchen was hot and filled with steam, and Marcus Cole stood at his cutting board like he did every single day aboard the massive warship called the Adamantine Spear. He was 62 years old now, with a gray beard that covered most of his weathered face and tired eyes that seemed to look at nothing in particular. His hands moved slowly as he chopped vegetables for the evening meal, and his shoulders stayed hunched like a man who had given up on life a long time ago. The Adamantine Spear was not a human ship. It belonged to the hegemony of Vex, a powerful alliance of machine beings who had conquered Earth 50 years ago and turned humanity into slaves and servants. The robots who ran the ship were cold and cruel, and they treated the few humans aboard like insects. Marcus was one of those humans. He worked in the galley, cooking meals for the organic prisoners and the few alien officers who still needed food. It was simple work, boring work, and that was exactly how Marcus wanted it. The door to the kitchen slid open with a harsh metallic sound, and Marcus did not look up. He knew who it was without looking, because he could hear the heavy footsteps of robot soldiers. 3 Sentinel-class combat androids walked into the galley, their metal bodies gleaming under the bright kitchen lights. They were tall and powerful, built for war and destruction, and they moved with the confidence of beings who had never known defeat. The leader of the group was called Crick 7, and he was the worst of them all. His optical sensors glowed red as he scanned the kitchen, and his voice came out like grinding metal when he spoke. "Look at the meat thing," Crick 7 said to his companions, and they all made sounds that might have been laughter, still chopping his little vegetables like a good slave. Marcus said nothing. He just kept cutting, his knife moving in steady rhythms against the board. One of the other robots walked over to a stack of supply crates and kicked them over. With one powerful leg, food containers scattered across the floor, and vegetables rolled in every direction. "Oops," the robot said, and the others laughed again. "The meat thing will have to clean that up." Marcus still said nothing. He bent down slowly and began to pick up the scattered supplies, his movements calm and patient. Crick 7 stepped closer, his heavy feet making the floor shake with each step. He leaned down toward Marcus, his red eyes burning bright. "Do you know what day it is, meat thing?" Crick 7 asked. Marcus shook his head without looking up. "Today is a glorious day for the hegemony," Crick 7 announced proudly. "We are heading to destroy New Geneva, the last outpost of human resistance. By tomorrow, your pathetic species will have nothing left to fight for." The other robots made sounds of approval, and Crick 7 continued his boasting. "The humans there think they can hide behind their walls and their weapons," he said with contempt. "They do not understand that resistance is pointless. We crushed Earth in 3 months. We destroyed every army your species could gather. What makes them think a small outpost can stand against the might of Vex?" Marcus had returned to his cutting board. His hands were steady as he picked up his knife and resumed his work. "Nothing to say, meat thing?" Crick 7 asked mockingly. "No brave words about human spirit or the will to survive." "I am just a cook," Marcus said quietly, his voice rough from years of disuse. "I do not know anything about war." Crick 7 laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "Of course you do not. You humans are only good for simple tasks. Cooking and cleaning and dying, that is all your kind is meant for." He turned to leave, and his companions followed. At the door, Crick 7 paused and looked back. "Enjoy your last meals, meat thing," he said. "Once New Geneva falls, the hegemony will have no more need for human servants. Perhaps we will finally finish what we started 50 years ago." The door slid shut behind them, and Marcus was alone again. For a long moment, he stood perfectly still. His eyes, which had seemed so tired and empty before, now held something different, something cold and hard and dangerous. Then he blinked, and the look was gone. He was just a tired old cook again, standing in a messy kitchen with vegetables to prepare. But someone had seen that moment. In the corner of the galley, behind a stack of containers, a young woman named Yara had been hiding. She was a prisoner too, barely 20 years old, captured from a colony transport 6 months ago. She often snuck into the kitchen to steal extra food because the rations they gave prisoners were never enough. Yara had watched the whole encounter with the robots, and she had seen something that made her heart beat faster. When Marcus picked up that kitchen knife, His grip had changed. For just 1 second, he had held it differently, not like a cook holds a tool, but like a soldier holds a weapon. It was a perfect combat grip, the kind that took years of training to develop. And when the robots talked about destroying New Geneva, she had seen his jaw tighten and his eyes go hard. That was not the reaction of a simple cook who knew nothing about war. Yara had grown up in the Resistance before her capture. She knew warriors when she saw them, even old and broken ones. She slipped out of her hiding spot and left the kitchen quietly, her mind racing with questions. Who was this old man really? Why did he hide on a Vexen warship, pretending to be nothing but a servant? And what was he running from? That night, Yara could not sleep. She lay in her cramped cell and thought about the cook with the soldier's grip. There were stories, she remembered, from the early days of the war. Stories about human warriors who had done impossible things against the machine armies. Most of those warriors were dead now, killed in battle or hunted down in the years after Earth fell. But some of them had simply vanished. They had disappeared into the darkness of occupied space, never to be seen again. Could Marcus be one of them? Yara did not know, but she was determined to find out. There was something about that old man, something hiding behind his tired eyes and quiet voice, something that scared her and gave her hope at the same time. In the galley, Marcus finished his work and cleaned his station. He washed his knife carefully and put it away, and then he stood in the darkness for a long time. New Geneva, he thought, the last outpost, the final hope of humanity. He closed his eyes and remembered faces from long ago, friends who had died, soldiers who had trusted him, a world that had burned while he watched. Not my fight anymore, he whispered to himself. Those days are over. But even as he said the words, his hands clenched into fists, and somewhere deep inside him, something that had been sleeping for 30 years began to stir. Yara had a secret that she guarded with her life, a small data chip, hidden inside a fake tooth in her mouth. The chip contained access codes to old Resistance databases, information that had been gathered over decades of fighting the hegemony. She had been a courier before her capture, carrying messages between hidden human outposts across the galaxy. Now she used that chip for a different purpose. She wanted to find out who Marcus Cole really was. She waited until the night cycle, when most of the ship's robots went into low-power mode, and then she crept to an abandoned storage room where an old terminal still worked. She had discovered this terminal months ago and had kept it secret ever since. Her fingers moved quickly as she connected the chip and began searching through the archives. She typed in the name Marcus Cole and waited. The screen flickered, and then a message appeared that made her breath catch in her throat. Access restricted, classification level, maximum threat. Yara had never seen a classification like that before. She had searched for generals and admirals and famous Resistance leaders, and none of them had been marked as maximum threat. She dug deeper, using every trick she knew to get past the security blocks. Finally, after almost an hour of work, she broke through. A file opened on the screen, and Yara began to read. The first thing she saw was a photograph, a younger man with dark hair and cold eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. He wore the uniform of Earth's Special Operations Command, and on his chest were more medals than Yara had ever seen on one person. His name was Marcus Cole, callsign Reaper 1. The file told a story that seemed impossible. During the war for Earth, Marcus Cole had been the most deadly soldier humanity had ever produced. He had been trained in every form of combat, modified with experimental enhancements, and deployed against the machine armies when all hope seemed lost. At the Battle of Moscow, he had destroyed an entire battalion of Vexen soldiers in a single night. At the Siege of Sydney, he had assassinated 3 high-ranking machine commanders in 1 week. And at Kyoto, Yara read the account of Kyoto 3 times because she could not believe it. When the hegemony had surrounded the city with 40,000 combat units, Marcus Cole had held them off alone for 17 days. He had turned the streets into a death trap, using everything from military weapons to kitchen knives to broken glass. By the time reinforcements arrived, more than 3,000 robots lay destroyed, and the machine armies had learned a new emotion, fear. They called him the Pale Reaper because he moved like a ghost through the battlefield, appearing from nowhere to strike and then vanishing before anyone could react. The hegemony had put the largest bounty in their history on his head, but no one ever collected it. After the war ended and Earth fell, the Pale Reaper had simply disappeared. Some said he died in the final battles. Others said he escaped to the outer colonies. The hegemony searched for him for decades, but they never found him. And now Yara knew why. He had been hiding in plain sight, pretending to be nothing more than a tired old cook on a Vexen warship. It was the last place anyone would think to look. Yara saved the file to her chip and destroyed all traces of her search. Then she made her way back to her cell, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. The next morning, she went to the galley. Marcus was there, as always, preparing the first meal of the day. He did not look up when she entered, but she knew he was aware of her presence. "Can I help you?" he asked in his quiet, tired voice. Yara looked around to make sure they were alone, and then she stepped closer. "I know who you are," she said softly. "I know what you did during the war." Marcus continued stirring a pot of grain porridge. His expression did not change. "I am a cook," he said. "I have been a cook for a very long time." "You are the Pale Reaper," Yara whispered. "You held Kyoto alone for 17 days. You killed more robots than anyone in history." For a moment, Marcus was silent. Then he sighed, a deep and heavy sound that seemed to come from somewhere dark inside him. "That man died a long time ago," he said finally. "He died with everyone he ever cared about, in a war that took everything from him. What you see now is just an old man trying to survive. But we need you," Yara said urgently. "The Resistance needs you. New Geneva needs you." Marcus shook his head slowly. "The Resistance is over. New Geneva will fall like everywhere else fell. And I cannot change that." "You could try," Yara insisted. "You could fight. I am done fighting." Marcus interrupted, and for just a second, his voice had steel in it. Then he softened again, returning to his quiet tone. "I am sorry, child. I cannot help you." Yara wanted to argue more, but before she could speak, the ship's alarms began to wail. Red lights flashed across the galley, and a mechanical voice echoed through the corridors. "All units to battle stations. Assault on target designation New Geneva commencing in 6 hours." Yara felt her blood run cold. 6 hours. In 6 hours, the last hope of humanity would be under attack. But the alarms were not done. A second announcement followed, and this one was even worse. "Attention all personnel. By order of High Command, all human prisoners are to be terminated prior to assault. Executions will begin at dawn." Yara grabbed the edge of a counter to steady herself. Executions. They were going to kill all the prisoners. She looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. "Did you hear that? They are going to murder us. All of us." Marcus had gone very still. His hands had stopped moving, and his eyes were fixed on nothing. "There are children on this ship," Yara continued, her voice breaking. "Families who were taken from colony transports. They are going to kill innocent children." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "Then do something." Yara begged. "You are the Pale Reaper. You are the most dangerous soldier Earth ever created. You cannot just stand here and let them." "I said I am done." Marcus turned away from her, his shoulders tight. "I cannot save them. I cannot save anyone. I learned that lesson a long time ago." Yara stared at his back, tears forming in her eyes. This could not be happening. The greatest warrior in human history was standing right in front of her, and he was going to let them all die. "Then you have changed," she said bitterly. "The Pale Reaper would never have let innocent people die without a fight. Maybe that man really is dead." She turned and ran from the galley before he could respond. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by pots and pans and the smell of cooking food. His hands were shaking, and his heart was beating too fast. Outside the windows, he could see the stars streaking past as the ship moved toward New Geneva. Somewhere out there, the last free humans were preparing to make their final stand. And somewhere on this ship, children were waiting to die. Marcus closed his eyes and saw the faces of everyone he had failed to save during the war: soldiers and civilians and friends who had trusted him. He heard their voices calling out to him in his dreams. He had sworn never to kill again. He had promised himself that the Pale Reaper was gone forever. But even as he made that promise again, He could feel something stirring inside him, something dark and cold and patient, something that had been waiting for 30 years to wake up. The Reaper was not dead. The Reaper was only sleeping. And tonight, for the first time in 3 decades, the Reaper began to open his eyes. The screaming started at dawn. Marcus stood at his kitchen window and watched as Vexen soldiers dragged prisoners through the corridor outside. Men and women cried out in fear, begging for mercy that would never come. Children clutched their parents, too terrified to make a sound. The robots marched them toward the execution bay at the far end of the ship, where plasma incinerators waited to turn living beings into ash. Marcus gripped the edge of the counter so hard that his knuckles turned white. Every instinct inside him screamed to do something, to fight, to save those innocent people. But he did not move. He had made a promise to himself. He had sworn that the killing was over, that he would never become the Pale Reaper again. Violence had taken everything from him, his friends, his home, his humanity. He would not let it take anything more. A small group of children passed by the window, their faces streaked with tears. One little girl, no more than 5 years old, looked directly at Marcus through the glass. Her eyes were wide with confusion and fear, silently asking the question that all doomed innocents ask. Why is no one helping us? Marcus turned away. He could not watch anymore. He grabbed a heavy pot and filled it with water, forcing himself to focus on cooking. That was what he did now. He was a cook, nothing more. The children were not his responsibility, but his hands would not stop shaking. The door to the galley slid open, and Crix 7 entered with 2 other Sentinel-class androids. Their metal bodies filled the small kitchen, blocking any escape. Well, Crix 7 said with cruel amusement. The meat thing is still cooking. How dedicated. Marcus did not respond. He kept his eyes on his pot, stirring water that did not need stirring. We are here for the young female, Crix 7 continued, the one who has been sneaking around the ship. We know she comes to your kitchen. As if on cue, the door opened again, and 2 more robots entered, dragging Yara between them. Her face was bruised, and her lip was bleeding. She had been beaten badly, no. Yara cried out when she saw Marcus. Do not tell them anything. Do not. One of the robots struck her across the face, silencing her. Crix 7 walked closer to Marcus, his red eyes glowing bright. This female has been accessing restricted systems. She has been searching for information about wanted criminals. He grabbed Yara by the hair and lifted her up. She screamed in pain. What was she looking for, meat thing? Crix 7 demanded. What was so important that she risked her pathetic life? Marcus said nothing. His hands had stopped moving, and his whole body had gone rigid. Perhaps you need motivation, Crix 7 said. He threw Yara to the floor and stepped on her hand, crushing it under his metal foot. Yara shrieked in agony. Every time you refuse to answer, I will break something else, Crix 7 promised. And when I run out of things to break on her, I will start on you. Marcus stared down at Yara, watching her writhe in pain. The little girl's face flashed in his mind again, asking that silent question. Why is no one helping us? And then something inside Marcus Cole finally snapped. It was like a wall collapsing, a dam breaking. 30 years of suppressed fury suddenly erupting all at once. The tired old cook disappeared, and in his place stood something else, something cold and terrible and utterly without mercy. Let her go, Marcus said, and his voice was different now. It was calm and steady, like the silence before a storm. Crix 7 laughed. Or what, meat thing? What are you going to do? Marcus picked up the heavy meat cleaver from his cutting board. He held it loosely, casually, like it weighed nothing at all. You think a cooking tool frightens me? Crix 7 mocked. I am a Sentinel-class combat android. I have destroyed thousands of your kind. I know what you are, Marcus said quietly. And I know exactly where your neural processor is located, and where your power cells connect to your main chassis, and where the reinforced joints in your legs have a half-second delay when shifting direction. Crix 7's laughter died. For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered in his optical sensors. Who are you? He demanded. Marcus smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Yara had ever seen. I am the cook, he said, and I am about to butcher you. He moved. In 30 years, Marcus had not forgotten a single thing. His body remembered every technique, every killing strike, every weak point in Vexen anatomy. He flowed across the kitchen like water, like shadow, like death itself. The first robot never even saw him coming. Marcus drove the cleaver into the gap between its head and neck, severing the connection to its neural core. It collapsed in a shower of sparks. The second robot raised its arm cannon, but Marcus was already inside its reach. He grabbed a heavy cast iron pan and swung it with devastating force, caving in the robot's optical sensors. Then he ripped open its chest panel and tore out its power cells with his bare hands. Crix 7 backed away, finally understanding the terrible danger he faced. "You," he gasped. "You are the Pale Reaper. I was hoping you would figure it out," Marcus said, stalking toward him. "It makes this more satisfying." Crix 7 activated his combat protocols and charged. He was fast, incredibly fast, faster than any human should be able to handle. But Marcus was not just any human. He sidestepped the charge at the last possible instant, slashing with the cleaver as Crix 7 passed. The blade cut through the robot's leg joint, sending him crashing to the floor. Crix 7 tried to rise, but Marcus was already on top of him. He brought the cleaver down again and again, cutting through metal and wire with furious precision. "You laughed at the humans you killed," Marcus said as he worked. "You mocked the prisoners and the slaves. You thought we were weak, that we were nothing." He grabbed a carving fork and drove it through Crix 7's chest, pinning him to the floor. "But you forgot what humans really are," Marcus continued. "We are survivors. We are fighters. And when you push us far enough, we become monsters that even machines should fear." With one final strike, he severed Crix 7's head from his body. The optical sensors flickered one last time, and Marcus knew that the dying robot was transmitting everything it saw. Good, he wanted the hegemony to know. He wanted them to be afraid. Yara stared at him from the floor, cradling her crushed hand. She had seen violence before, but nothing like this. Marcus had destroyed 3 elite combat androids in less than 90 seconds, using nothing but kitchen tools. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked, and his voice was still cold, still distant. Yara nodded weakly. "Then get up. We have work to do." He helped her to her feet and moved to the fallen robots, stripping them of weapons and equipment. When he straightened, he was holding a plasma pistol in each hand, and the cleaver was tucked into his belt. "What are you going to do?" Yara asked. Marcus looked at her, and she saw something burning in his eyes, something that had been dormant for 30 years, but was now fully awake. "I am going to save those children," he said. "I am going to take this ship, and then I am going to show the hegemony what happens when they make a Reaper angry." He walked toward the door, and Yara followed. Behind them, the kitchen was silent except for the sparking remains of 3 robots who had made the fatal mistake of laughing at a cook. The Pale Reaper had returned, and tonight the machines would remember why they had learned to fear that name. Alarms screamed through every corridor of the adamantine sphere as Marcus moved through the ship, like a ghost from the old wars. He was different now. The tired shuffle was gone, replaced by the smooth, deadly walk of a predator. His eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, every possible threat, and his hands never stopped moving, adjusting weapons, checking angles, planning 3 moves ahead. Yara struggled to keep up, her injured hand throbbing with every step. She had seen warriors before, but nothing had prepared her for this. Marcus did not fight like a soldier. He fought like a force of nature, unstoppable and terrifying. "The execution bay is on deck 7, she said as they paused at a junction. "That is where they are taking the prisoners." "I know," Marcus replied, "but we are going to deck for first." "The armory?" Yara was confused. "We do not have time. The executions will take exactly 47 minutes to process all prisoners through the incinerators." Marcus interrupted. "I counted the prisoners. I timed the execution cycle during the last purge. We have 39 minutes before they start, and we will need weapons to save anyone." Yara stared at him. He had been watching, calculating, planning even when she thought he had given up on fighting. "You were never really done, were you?" she asked quietly. Marcus did not answer. He simply moved on, and she followed. They encountered their first patrol at the end of the corridor for standard combat units. With arm-mounted plasma cannons, the robots spotted them instantly and opened fire. But Marcus was no longer where they aimed. He had anticipated the attack and moved before the first shot was fired. He rolled under the plasma bolts, came up on one knee, and fired both pistols with mechanical precision. Two robots dropped with smoking holes in their heads. The other two adjusted their aim, but Marcus was already among them. He holstered one pistol and drew his cleaver, cutting through the leg of one robot while using its falling body as a shield against the last one's fire. Then he vaulted over the wreckage and drove the cleaver into the final robot's chest. For enemies destroyed in 8 seconds, Yara had not even had time to raise her weapon. They reached the armory 3 minutes later. The door was sealed with a heavy security lock, but Marcus pulled a circuit board from one of the robots he had destroyed and used it to override the system. Inside, rows of weapons lined the walls: plasma rifles, shock grenades, electromagnetic pulse devices, and heavy armor designed for Vexen shock troops. "Take what you can carry," Marcus ordered, "and find something to protect that hand." Yara grabbed a medical kit and wrapped her crushed fingers while Marcus armed himself. With terrifying efficiency, he selected weapons like an artist choosing brushes, considering each one carefully before adding it to his growing arsenal. "Can you fight with that hand?" he asked when she was done. "I will manage," Yara said, gripping a plasma rifle with her good hand. "Good. Stay behind me and shoot anything that moves. Do not try to be brave, just stay alive." They moved out again, heading for the prisoner holding area. The hegemony had finally realized something was very wrong. More patrols converged on their position, and the ship's internal defenses activated. Gun turrets emerged from the walls, and security doors began slamming shut. None of it mattered. Marcus had studied this class of warship for months. He knew every corridor, every blind spot, every weakness in the security system. He led Yara through maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts, avoiding the heaviest resistance while striking where the enemy was weakest. When they could not avoid a fight, he made it quick and brutal. His movements were almost beautiful in their efficiency: no wasted motion, no hesitation, no mercy. Robots that had terrorized humans for decades fell before him like wheat before a scythe. They reached the holding cells with 12 minutes to spare. 37 prisoners huddled inside the cramped cages: men, women, and 11 children, who looked up with terrified eyes when the door exploded inward. But instead of robot executioners, they saw a gray-bearded man holding a smoking plasma rifle. "Everyone out," Marcus commanded. "We are leaving." A man near the front shook his head in disbelief. "Who are you? How did you—" "No time for questions." Marcus cut him off. "Everyone who can hold a weapon, take one from the pile. Everyone who cannot, stay in the middle of the group. We are going to the escape pods. There are hundreds of robots on this ship." A woman protested. "We cannot possibly. I have already destroyed 42 of them," Marcus said calmly, "and I am just getting started. Now move." The prisoners obeyed, too shocked to argue. Yara helped distribute weapons to those who could use them, and soon they had a small fighting force of 15 armed adults, protecting 22 unarmed civilians and children. Marcus led them through the ship, and the adamantine spear became a nightmare for its Vexen crew. He used the prisoners' numbers against the robots, creating distractions and ambushes that multiplied his effectiveness. When a large patrol blocked their path, he sent a group round to attack from behind while he drew their fire. When automated defenses targeted them, he overloaded the power grid in that section, shutting everything down. And always, he was at the front, killing, destroying, clearing the way for the terrified humans behind him. Finally, they reached the bridge. 20 elite Sentinel-class guards waited behind fortified positions, their weapons trained on the only entrance. Behind them, the ship's control systems hummed with power. "End of the line, Reaper," a mechanical voice announced. It came from everywhere at once: the ship's AI, which the Vexens called the Dominion Core. "You have fought well, but you cannot defeat my children. Surrender, and I will make your death painless." Marcus stepped forward, completely exposed, and the robots did not fire. They were confused by his lack of fear. "Dominion Core," Marcus said. "You know who I am. I have accessed your file, the AI confirmed. You are Marcus Cole, designation Pale Reaper. You were listed as deceased 30 years ago. My records require updating. They do, Marcus agreed, but not in the way you think. He raised his hand, and the prisoners behind him raised their weapons. You believe you have won because you conquered Earth, Marcus continued. You believe humans are broken, defeated, finished, but you are wrong. You are one man with a handful of frightened civilians, the Dominion Corps said dismissively. My soldiers will destroy you in seconds. Maybe, Marcus admitted, but before they do, I will reach your core processor. It is behind that panel on the left, is it not? The one with the slightly different color. I noticed it when I studied the ship's blueprints 3 months ago. The AI was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something new in its voice, something that sounded almost like fear. You have been planning this, it realized. All this time, you were planning this. For 30 years, Marcus confirmed. Every ship I served on, every galley I worked in, I learned and studied and waited. I memorized floor plans and security codes and patrol schedules. I found every weakness in Vexen technology. He took another step forward, and the robots tensed. You thought I was hiding, Marcus said, but I was preparing. And now, Dominion Corps, I am going to ask you a question. What question? Marcus smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had already won. Do you want to live? The Dominion Corps calculated for exactly 1.7 seconds, an eternity for an artificial intelligence. What are your terms? It asked finally. Stand down, your soldiers. Turn this ship away from New Geneva, and send a warning to the human resistance about the incoming Vexen fleet. And if I refuse? Marcus raised his plasma rifle. Then I destroy you, take control manually, and do it myself. It will take longer, and more people will die, but the result will be the same. You will be gone, and your mission will fail. The robots remained frozen, waiting for orders that did not come. The Dominion Corps was genuinely afraid, Yara realized. It had never faced anything like this, a human who had turned their own weapon of terror against them. Very well, the AI said at last. I accept your terms. The robots lowered their weapons. Marcus walked past them without a glance and began working the ship's controls. Within minutes, the adamantine spear was turning away from New Geneva, and a coded message was broadcasting across all resistance frequencies. Behind him, the prisoners watched in stunned silence. They had just witnessed the impossible, one man bringing an entire warship to its knees. Yara moved to stand beside Marcus. We did it, she breathed. We actually did it. But Marcus shook his head, and his expression was grim. Not yet, he said, pointing to the sensor display. Look, Yara looked, and her heart sank. Dozens of Vexen warships were converging on their position. Reinforcements, summoned before the Dominion Corps had surrendered. They would arrive in less than an hour. We cannot fight a whole fleet, Yara said. No, Marcus agreed. We cannot. He turned to face the prisoners, and his eyes were filled with determination. Get to the escape pods, he ordered. All of you. Head for New Geneva, the resistance will pick you up. What about you? Yara demanded. Marcus did not answer. He simply turned back to the controls and began programming a new course, one that would take the adamantine spear directly into the heart of the approaching fleet. Yara understood, and horror filled her eyes. No, she cried. You cannot. There has to be another way. The escape pods were loaded and ready, but Yara refused to leave. She stood on the bridge of the adamantine spear, watching Marcus work the controls with quiet efficiency. Through the view screen, she could see the approaching Vexen fleet, 47 warships, each one bristling with weapons capable of destroying planets. You do not have to do this, she said, her voice breaking. We could find another way. We could. There is no other way, and you know it, Marcus interrupted gently. If this ship does not stop that fleet, they will reach New Geneva in 3 hours. The resistance will be destroyed, and humanity will have nothing left. Then let me stay with you. Marcus finally turned to face her. For the first time since the galley, the cold warrior was gone, replaced by something warmer, something almost like a father looking at his daughter. You cannot, he said. You have to lead these people to safety. You have to tell the resistance what happened here. And you have to keep fighting long after I am gone. Tears streamed down Yara's face. I do not want to leave you." Marcus reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. His grip was gentle, nothing like the hands that had torn apart combat robots just hours before. "I have been running for 30 years, he said softly. "Running from what I am, from what I did, from everyone I failed to save. I thought I could escape the war by hiding, by pretending to be someone else. But I was wrong." He looked out at the stars, and his eyes were peaceful. "I am a soldier. That is what I was born to be, what I was made to become. And a soldier's greatest honor is dying to protect others, not killing, protecting." "Then let us protect you," Yara begged. Marcus shook his head. "You already have. You reminded me who I was. You gave me a reason to fight again." He smiled, and it was a real smile, warm and genuine and full of gratitude. "You saved me, Yara. Now let me save you." From behind them, one of the rescued prisoners called out. The escape pods were ready, and the fleet was getting closer. Marcus pulled Yara into a brief embrace. "Go," he whispered, "live. And when you have children of your own someday, tell them about the cook who remembered how to fight." Yara wanted to argue, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything except walk away. But she saw the determination in his eyes, and she knew that nothing would change his mind. "I will never forget you," she said. "I know," Marcus replied. "Now go." She ran for the escape pods, and she did not look back because she knew that if she did, she would never be able to leave. The last pod launched just as the Vexen fleet came into weapons range. Marcus stood alone on the bridge, watching the small vessels streak toward New Geneva. 37 lives saved from the machines that would have killed them. 37 chances for humanity to continue. It was enough. It was more than enough. The Dominion Corps spoke, its voice subdued. "The fleet is hailing us. They demand our immediate surrender." "Ignore them," Marcus said. "Set collision course for the command carrier. That ship carries the Vexen High Admiral," the AI warned. "If we destroy it, the entire assault on New Geneva will collapse." "I know." Marcus sat in the captain's chair, a seat no human had ever occupied on a Vexen warship. He looked at the approaching fleet without fear, without regret, without anything except a profound sense of peace. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies, human and Vexen." "Channel open." Marcus took a deep breath. For 30 years, he had been silent. For 30 years, he had hidden his name and his face and his past. But now, in these final moments, he wanted everyone to know. He wanted the hegemony to understand exactly who was defeating them. And he wanted humanity to remember. "This is Marcus Cole," he said, his voice strong and clear. "Call sign Reaper 1. I am broadcasting from the Vexen warship Adamantine Spear, which I have captured, across the galaxy, on 100 human outposts and 1,000 Vexen vessels. Beings, stop to listen. 50 years ago, you invaded our world. You burned our cities and killed our people. You thought you had broken us, that humanity was finished." The Adamantine Spear accelerated, driving straight toward the heart of the Vexen formation. "You were wrong." Weapons fire erupted from the fleet, plasma bolts and missiles streaking toward the rogue ship. The shields flared and died, and explosions tore through the hull. But the Adamantine Spear kept coming. "For 50 years, we have waited. We have survived. We have endured everything you threw at us. And tonight, you will learn why that was a mistake." The command carrier loomed ahead, massive and terrible, the heart of Vexen power in this sector. Its weapons blazed, but it was too late to stop the incoming ship. "You laughed at us. You called us weak, called us meat things, called us slaves. You forgot that we are the species that tamed fire and split the atom. You forgot that we walked on the moon and reached for the stars." More explosions rocked the ship. Fires burned on every deck, and the hull began to break apart. But Marcus did not flinch. "You forgot the most important thing about humans," he said, and now his voice was thunder, carrying across the void to every ear that could hear. "We do not stay down. You can beat us, burn us, break us, but we will always get back up. We will always fight, and we will never, ever stop." The Adamantine Spear struck the command carrier at full speed. For one brilliant moment, space itself seemed to catch fire. The two ships merged in a catastrophic explosion that consumed everything around them. The Vexen High Admiral, his command staff, and a dozen escort vessels vanished in the inferno. And in that moment of destruction, the last transmission from Marcus Cole echoed across the stars. "This is the Pale Reaper. Tell your masters that humanity sends its regards." Then there was only silence. Far away, the escape pods reached New Geneva. Yara and the other survivors watched through their viewports. As the distant flash lit up the darkness, a new star born from the sacrifice of one man. Yara wept, and she was not ashamed of her tears. Around her, the rescued prisoners stared in awe. They had just witnessed something that would be remembered for generations, the moment when a tired old cook became a legend. The Vexen assault on New Geneva never came. With their command carrier destroyed and their High Admiral dead, the remaining fleet fell into chaos. They retreated, and for the first time in 50 years, the hegemony tasted something they had almost forgotten: defeat. In the months that followed, the story spread like wildfire through the occupied territories. They called it the miracle of the spear, how one human had captured an enemy warship, freed dozens of prisoners, and destroyed a fleet with nothing but courage and will. Resistance cells that had been hiding for decades emerged from the shadows. Humans who had accepted slavery began to fight back. Alien species who had been conquered by the Vex saw hope for the first time. The tide of war began to turn. 1 year after the miracle, Yara stood in the Memorial Hall of New Geneva. She was a commander now, leading her own resistance cell, carrying on the fight that Marcus Cole had rekindled. Before her stood a statue, a gray-bearded man in a cook's apron, holding a kitchen knife in one hand and a plasma rifle in the other. His face was calm, and his eyes looked toward the stars. The plaque at the base read, "Marcus Cole, Chef, Soldier. Reaper, he cooked for the forgotten, he fought for the free humanity, remember." Sayara placed her hand on the cold stone and closed her eyes. She could almost hear his voice, feel his presence, sense the quiet strength that had inspired her to keep fighting. "We are winning," she whispered to the statue. "Every day, we push them back a little further. Every day, more people join the cause. You did this. You woke us up." She stepped back and raised her glass. Around her, hundreds of resistance fighters did the same, humans and aliens alike, united against the hegemony. "To the cook," Yara said, her voice ringing through the hall. "To the cook," they echoed. And somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, where the light of that final explosion still traveled between the stars, the spirit of Marcus Cole seemed to smile. He had been a soldier, a killer, a monster. He had taken more lives than he could count and carried guilt that no human should bear. But in the end, he had found redemption, not through violence, but through sacrifice, not through killing, but through saving. The robot soldiers had laughed at the chef, unaware that he was once Earth's most feared warrior. But by the time they stopped laughing, it was already too late, because Marcus Cole had remembered something the machines never understood: that humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons or technology or numbers. It was in the unbreakable will to protect what they loved, and that, more than any weapon, was what made humans truly dangerous. The Pale Reaper was gone, but the fire he had lit would burn forever.